Hey, Unruly Subjects, it's Chinjirai, and I need your help to keep the show going strong. If you love what we do here, consider supporting us by joining our Patreon community. It's the best way to back the show, and you get some incredible benefits in return. Membership starts at just $5 a month. I mean, there's nothing that cheap, at least in New York. And you immediately get ad-free episodes and exclusive premium episodes. That includes interview outtakes and other extras you ain't gonna hear anywhere else. But that's not all. You can access the Unruly chat and polls. When we have a live event, you're gonna get the pre-sale tickets and the merch. Oh my God, the merch. You know the merch is gonna be fly. And you receive invitations to our Q&A live streams and, my favorite, our annual exclusive hangout with me, the producers, and a special guest. So yo, come on people, join the Unruly mob. Visit patreon.com/unrulysubjects. And thank you for making this show possible. Row Home Productions.
What's up, Unruly Subjects? Who am I talking to?
I'm Andrew. Andrew Ian. You know, it's like they call me AI. You know what I mean?
So like Allen Iverson?
No, like AI.
All right. Well, what's on your mind, man?
Like you were talking about police, right? And dude, I totally agree. Like there's too many police and they're really expensive. You know, and I there's just solutions right in front of us that we're not using.
People want to know what the solutions to the policing problem is, and
well, like it's not, Trump thinks, I'll put more police there, but the one key solution that could help us with a lot of stuff is AI.
Oh, you mean like AI, like artificial, like.
Yeah, AI, man. I don't know if you do you use ChatGPT? Like the technology, the stuff it could do to help with policing is incredible. You could have drones and driverless cars could pull people over.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on the fact that there's a lot of police, and I maybe technology does play a role, but I gotta say, man, I'm a little skeptical that AI is just gonna fix this. I mean, tell me more about what this would look like, I guess, is the question, Andrew.
Well, it would be like you just have AI in the traffic lights. And have you seen the Musk, those robots, like Boston Dynamic, and some of them can dance and they can be nice to kids, like bots, and they can help old people and they can stop crime. Did you see you saw RoboCop, right? You don't need cops, and their bots are cheap. You could make them cheaper.
Andrew, I feel like RoboCop is one of those things that's like an argument. Is literally one of the pieces that helps you understand the problem. That's the world we don't want. But I appreciate your enthusiasm about technology and about police. And I hope you can keep listening, because we got a really good guest coming on.
I'm going to tell you the other thing. Your show, you should use more AI. You could, you don't even have, where are you? You're in your office now. Where are you? In your studio?
Yeah, I'm in the studio and I'm here, I'm taking your call. And
you don't even have to be there. You could have a bot do your show, could write the show, could talk on the air, and you could be on a beach chilling while the show is happening, all from AI, and it's going to be more accurate. It's going to be better.
Well, Andrew, thank you for coming on. I hope you keep listening, and thank you.
What up, y'all? Unruly Subjects is back in the building, you know what I mean? We still trucking, you know what I'm saying? We still moving forward, you know what I mean? And y'all here, I'm real excited to be with y'all. Yo, first of all, shout out to y'all, shout out to the Patreon people first and foremost, you know what I'm saying? Yo, if you didn't join us on Patreon, come over. I don't want you to miss what's happening over there. There's lots of stuff over there, and of course we got different tiers. You can get on Patreon. You can join for free and we can connect there, or you want to support the show, which we encourage, you know what I mean? Because, man, we building this thing from the bottom up, you know what I mean? I just want to wish everybody strength as you survive these cold conditions, because it and over in my part of the world, you know what I mean? It is freezing, scary cold, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah. And speaking of cold, look, we try to keep the energy uplifting over here, but I'm not going to lie to you. This week's topic is depressing as hell. It's very depressing, y'all. I mean, it's but it is important And it's something that really we need to be talking about, because we see the spectacle of, people being snatched off the street and kidnapped and shot by ICE. But what we don't hear enough about is what happens to people on these ICE flights. So we have an expert in this, Gillian Brockell, who's going to tell us why these flights are becoming longer, why they're becoming crueler. And it's also wrapped up with our public money. But the only encouraging note there is that we're going to talk about some steps, or at least some pressure points that we can look at to transform this. So that's our main interview. Before we get into that, I want to talk about what's going on in the news. And, look, there's a lot of stuff going on in the news. We had some big entertainment events. Shout out to Bad Bunny, you know what I'm saying? I ain't no big Super Bowl fan, but man, that was powerful, and there's so much going on in the world where sometimes people are like, Dag, Chan, y'all focus on a lot of labor. Well, I hear that, and I got to update. We're focused on labor again today. That's what we do. Yes, we are. We doing labor, man. People act like labor is a side story. You know what I mean? I know a lot of journalists were like, oh, the labor beat. No, the labor is the main beat. That's the main pulse. I get excited when I think about people working and valuing people's work, because I feel like in all the other places, like the workplaces, sometimes it's like, capitalism wants to tell you our work isn't valuable. Your work isn't valuable. You're not doing enough. Do more. You're asking for too much money. And this week, that labor beat is popping off, man. It's like 6 different things going on. First of all, the New York City nurses. As of this recording, nurses at Montefiore and Mount Sinai have reached tentative agreements. You know what I'm saying? And one detail I don't want to lose here is how these fights are also about who gets protected. There are nurses explicitly pointing to protections for immigrants and trans patients. So big shout out to them. And, on the West Coast, the Kaiser strike is now moving into week 3, and more workers are joining that labor action in Southern California. You know what I'm saying? Including pharmacy and lab employees. So we're going to definitely keep tracking that, because there's a pattern here, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But, you can definitely see what's going on. So we'll check in and keep you updated on that. By the way, if you didn't hear our interview with Nurse Kim Mullen, you got to go to the Patreon and go to that episode and just, oh my God, it's so powerful interview. She really lays out what's at stake there. But in San Francisco, there's another strike, and it's the public school teachers. You know what I'm saying? Woo! Man, I love teachers. You know what I'm saying? Not just because I am one. I'm talking about the public school teachers are doing it. They've led in labor for a long time. And this is one of the first big walkouts like this in nearly 50 years over wages, health benefits, and resources for students with special needs. So schools across the district are closed. You know what I'm saying? They shut it down. And if you listen closely to what the teachers are saying, they're like, look, it's about the cost of living. It's about staffing. It's about stability for kids. And this is the pattern that I'm talking about, right? Like workplaces, even in the public school workplace, create conditions where people can't do what they need to do to serve us. And then, you know what I'm saying, when people try to turn up and say, no, we're not taking this. We want to make things better for the public. We want to make things better so that we can continue to do our work and we can live. They get blamed, right? And all those kinds of things. So they get, what makes it so insidious is that management has the nerve to try to say, oh, it's just about money, while they racking up, millions and billions of dollars and spending it in all kinds of horrible places. So shout out to the public school teachers. And of course, I got to talk about higher education. There's 2 quick headlines I want to draw your attention to. Down in Texas, the situation at Texas A&M has just gotten completely out of control, right? They've revised policies that require professors to get administrative approval for lesson plans that might advocate race or gender ideology, right? And they're also restricting discussion of things that they determine to be, quote, controversial matter, right? Or not connected to the subject of the class, as if they can determine what's connected to the subjects of the class. And there's even talk of a hotline for students to report discomfort. So you know where that's going. And so what they're really doing with these policies, right, is really creating a groundwork for self-censorship. Because if you're a professor there, you don't want to run into problems, you're going to be thinking about that at the same time that you're trying to think about what do we need to teach to prepare students for the world, for a diverse world, to prepare them maybe to fight against injustice, right? And you feel like you can't teach that. So That's a real problem. But here's the part I want to lift up. People are pushing back, right? When the president was forced out and when these policies started coming down, thousands of students, faculty, and other folks have gathered to push back on it, right? And, look, it's going to be a long, hard fight. But people recognize what's happening, and they're not going for that, right? So shout out to those people fighting at Texas A&M. Of course, AAUP has your back. And in Oklahoma, there's a whole other front, an executive order aimed at effectively ending tenure protections in public higher ed in that state. Now, listen, we probably need to have a whole conversation about what tenure is, because I know that some people just look at that like, oh, that's just a privilege that professors get and it doesn't have to do with justice. No, listen, it absolutely has to do with justice, because first of all, at least the people that, work in higher ed labor in my world, we want to see everybody who works in higher ed have job security. And really, people in general should have job security, right? You know what I mean? So that's one thing. And secondly, a lot of times when you see people speaking out against injustice, a good number of those people writing and speaking out about that are professors. And the reason they can do that is because they have, a tenure protection, right? Where, basically your boss can't fire you because you said something they don't like. So we want people to have that. That's the only way that you can have some kind of fight for justice, is if you have people who are willing to speak and know they won't be fired. So tenure, academic freedom, absolutely important. Our president, Todd Wilson, has spoken out against what's going on, and we'll post the sort of statement that AAUP has made against this. But that brings me to New York, because there's a situation brewing right here at my own university. An organization called Contract Faculty United is in a strike authorization vote. And, we're going to hear right now from Elizabeth Fay, one of the organizers who works with Contract Faculty United, UAW. But what I want you to understand is that, like, a huge number of faculty across the country don't have the protections of tenure. They have like huge workloads, lower pay. Yeah, so what's going on at NYU really, I think, is an important story in the country as well. And so Elizabeth is going to talk about, what is at stake for these folks and what has to happen. I don't think they want to shut the university down, but I'm going to tell you what, if they vote to authorize a strike, we're going to see. So let's hear from Elizabeth Fay, where she breaks down what's going on at this phase of this struggle. If a strike is authorized, can we paint the picture of what that's going to look like for the university? Because I feel like that's going to have a significant effect on the operation of this university. What do you think that'll look like?
I mean, I think that's a great question. And so here it's important to say that contract faculty are half of all the full-time faculty at NYU.
Woo.
There are about 1,000 of us across the 11 schools in our unit, and we do a lot of everything. Our jobs often look very similar to the jobs of tenured faculty. So we direct programs, right? We coordinate courses. We advise students. We sit on committees. We do all kinds of really crucial, both curricular and extracurricular and administrative work to keep this university running. And so a strike would be a total stoppage of labor. So it would mean that our classes didn't go forward, but it would also mean that all of the other work, right, surrounding it, all of the extra work that we do with our students, that would also stop. So I think that would actually have a really enormous impact on NYU. NYU does not work without our labor.
NYU, people in a position to make a choice. I hope you're hearing this. And one thing I want to be crystal clear about, because when workers try to go on strike, often what happens is the sort of management or administration tries to paint us as workers like we're the ones hurting students, we're the ones hurting things. And sometimes the press goes along with that. So let me be crystal clear. Right now, by trying to fight this fight, these workers are fighting for the conditions to make education better. To make education better for y'all family that's in school. If you're a person who's in the university, you know what I mean? It's like they're trying to make that better for all the people who are affected by the university in New York. You know what I'm saying? And how this university is governed. They're trying to fight to make that better. And the people who don't want to give real working conditions, y'all are the ones jeopardizing this if a strike happens. We're going to make damn sure everybody knows that. We're not going to be able to flip this into some other thing. So I would be paying attention. That's a lot of folks who can really make the thing stop. And I don't think you want that. In the middle of a semester, I don't think y'all want that problem. And anyway, I'm going to stop ranting, you know what I'm saying? But then again, it's my podcast. I can rant if I want to, you know what I mean? Yo, Elizabeth Faye, much respect. Listen, for people who are listening to this and maybe not directly connected, what are our asks? How do we want people to engage? Like, what if you have no relation to the university? What should they do?
I mean, if you have no relation to the university and you live in New York City, I think there will be opportunities to come out and support us publicly, I hope, in the next couple of months. I will say, if you are somebody who cares about education or who works in education, you got to organize your workplace. We are doing everything we can to defend the work that we do here. I know that it matters to a lot of people at NYU and at schools and universities across the country. Find your networks, organize.
So that was Elizabeth Faye with Contract Faculty United UAW at NYU. We're going to post that whole interview on Patreon, so I really want you to go over there and hear the whole thing, because she really breaks down what's at stake at this moment. And we're going to keep an eye on that. And of course, we'll update you, on what happens with the vote and everything else, because this is definitely one of those moments where the university has to decide whether they value the people doing the work. All right, let's get to our main story this week. We've all been watching the horror show of ICE kidnapping people, shooting people, breaking car windows, dragging people out all across the country. And then in many cases, detaining them and putting them on flights to send them, around to different places around the world. In many cases, they're being sent to places that they're not from or haven't been in a long time. But we don't really understand what's happening on those flights, though. So today's show is going to take you actually onto the actual flights where, among other things, people are shackled. And our guest, Gillian Brockell, who herself was a flight attendant, has really dug into what's going on with these flights. But it's not just what's happening on the flights, which we need to hear. It's also the way that this is a business model, right? That is actually very much intertwined with public funds. And, so it's a story also about how public money is getting used. And the actors here are also important for us to understand, right? Because we just always hear like, oh, it's Trump, Trump, Trump. But it's not just Trump, right? It's people working with this administration. So Gillian Brockell is going to break it all down. And one of the things that's really important is she's going to call our attention to some pressure points around money. That's a place for you, for all of us, to get a little bit unruly and start raising some very hard questions. So I can't wait for you to hear this interview with Gillian. And then after that, because this interview is so intense, I got a little dessert, some music I just learned about. And it's just something that made me kind of feel like I was healing a little bit from everything that's going on. So I'm going to bring that to y'all, and a way for us to get more of that made, because at the end of the day, we got to survive all this, y'all. So stay with us. Gillian Brockell after the break. This episode of Unruly Subjects is brought to you by Haymarket Books, which has loads of great left-wing titles, perfect for listeners like you. And one that I know you're going to feel is The Extended Universe, How Disney Killed the Movies and Took Over the World by Vicky Osterweil. A provocative history of Disney's rise to cultural dominance, The Extended Universe pulls skeletons from the corporate closet to decode the political messages hidden in all your favorite childhood movies. In The Extended Universe, Vicky Osterweil takes us on a quest to discover how Disney's Imagineers have made it impossible to reflect on the wonders of growing up without thinking of Disney's movies, amusement parks, and merchandising. Drawing on extensive interviews with filmmakers, screenwriters, union organizers, and Disney adults alike, Osterweil unearths reactionary political commitments and maleficent legal maneuvers so cartoonishly evil they would make one of Walt's own animated villains blush. As Natasha Leonard puts it, Osterweil is the brilliant, generous, and revolutionary guide we need to rethink cultural production today and kill the mouse inside our heads. Find The Extended Universe at haymarketbooks.org, where all hardcover books are 10% off every day. Unruly Subjects is supported by listeners just like you. Join us at patreon.com/unrulysubjects.
Before we continue, a note for our listeners. The following interview includes a brief description of a suicide attempt in the context of deportation.
All right. Unruly Subjects. Yes, I'm so excited. In the building with us today, we have a journalist who has done some incredible reporting on something that's really important and not enough people are talking about at all. It has to do with ICE and ICE flights. And let me tell you something. When I've read this article, I said, oh my God, there's so many layers to this. I had to reach out. And so with us today on the podcast, we have Gillian Brockell.
Pew, pew, pew.
Thank you for joining our strange and wonderful show.
Thank you for having me. I'm already a fan of the show, fan of yours since Uncivil, so I'm really stoked to be here.
By way of introduction, Gillian Brockell is an incredible reporter. She used to work for the Washington Post and has just been doing really important, deep reporting. Importantly, you were a former flight attendant. Is that correct?
Yeah. I was a flight attendant from age of 25 to 30, and then I went back to school and became a journalist. I wanted to see the world. I didn't have any money, and so that was my solution, was to just make it my job.
That's right. Love to the flight attendants. Shout out to the flight attendants. You know what I mean? They do such important work. And your experience as a flight attendant was really relevant to this reporting. Gillian wrote an article called ICE Deportation Flights Are Getting Longer and Crueler. And that is true, but also it's just scratching the surface of a really terrifying problem. And it's something that we actually have an action step for. So Gillian is going to break down for us exactly what's going on here on these ICE flights, what's happened, who's responsible for this. And then we're actually going to have some action steps because there's something that we can do in this case and something that we absolutely must do. So, first of all, I guess we should start out by saying so much of the focus right now when we talk about ICE is on like the spectacle of ICE capture, right? We're seeing images of ICE run into people's houses, snatching people out of cars, unfortunately now shooting people. We don't see the deaths that happen in ICE detainment, right? Like in the detention centers. Those don't seem to have been included in a lot of the main headlines. But that's kind of like what people are paying a lot of attention to. But a lot of what's also happening is that ICE is snatching people and then putting them on flights. So you start this article talking about the experience of someone named Melissa Tron. Could you explain what happened to her?
Sure. Melissa is 44. She lived in Hagerstown, Maryland. She's a mother of 4. She's got kids aged 7 to 20. And my article starts with her boarding a plane in Alexandria, Louisiana, which is one of the main hubs for ICE detention centers and one of the places where a lot of ICE deportation flights depart from. And so she sat on a bus for 7 hours with no food or water. She hadn't had any food or water for 10 hours. And then they boarded her onto this plane that, doesn't have a name on it. It's a big plane, 767. It can take, hours to board. And she's shackled. She's shackled at the wrists and ankles attached to a chain around her waist. And she's sort of looking around and she's noticing there was one ICE guard that looked kind of nice or less mean than the other ones. And she said, how long is this flight going to take? And he said, where are you from? And she said, Vietnam. And he was like, sorry, you're the last stop. You're not going to get to Hanoi until Thursday. And it was Monday night.
Oh, my God.
And her total journey lasted 40 hours. She went first to Baltimore for a fuel and crew stop, then to Romania for a fuel stop. And then I believe her flight also went to India, Nepal, Laos, and then to Vietnam.
That sounds like a full-out nightmare.
Yeah.
And I want to dig a little bit even more into the conditions on these flights because what you've reported on is, I think people just need to understand. But let me ask you, when you started with Melissa's story, what did you want people to really understand? What did you want to make unavoidable here with this particular story and account of her flight?
Just the cruelty that is being industrialized here. Like you said, I used to be a flight attendant, and this shackling on ice flights has been going on for years, and I didn't know about it. I only found out last May, and I just so mad about it as a person whose job it was to make sure that federal aviation regulations were being followed for people's safety. A person cannot evacuate an aircraft in an emergency if their legs are shackled. They can't reach for an oxygen mask if they can't lift their hands above their shoulders. They can't put on a life vest if they can't reach around their waist because of their shackles. And, in reporting this story, I spoke to a forensic pathologist who's an expert on shackling and on, ice abuse. And she said that after just a few hours of shackling, you can get permanent nerve damage. You get bruising, chafing. It's just painful. You can get swelling. Also, you swell up, everybody swells up a couple millimeters when they're up in the air. So if your shackles are tight and then you go up in the air, now they're even tighter. So you're talking about just excruciating pain.
I have several family members who are at risk of blood clots. They can't be under those conditions. You might die.
Right. You need to get up and move if you have a clotting disorder. Something like 10 to 20% of the population has a clotting disorder and doesn't even know it, right? You only know if you've had a clotting event and survive, right? And so if you're not allowed to move, if you're not wearing your compression socks, then you can be developing DVTs in your legs. And then once you get to your deportation stop and you start moving again, that clot can move to your lungs, your brain, your heart, and kill you. And ICE doesn't track who dies 2 days after we deport them. So this could have happened many times, and we just don't know it.
Maybe the only thing that could be even more horrific than some of these details you're laying out about these flights is the fact that these conditions are basically produced as a business model. As I was reading your story, I said, wow, there's another way to tell this story, which, like many things in our lives, started with someone saying, hey, you know what? I think there's a way for us to make a ton of money. So if you had to tell the story that way and to focus on someone like Michael Durrell, how would you tell the story starting from that point? And then I want to come back to the nature of these flights.
Well, Michael Durrell is also an immigrant. He's not that much older than Melissa Tran. He's in his early 50s, and he came here in his 20s to bring infrastructure, private equity investment to the United States. It was already a big thing in Australia, and he brought it to the U.S. So basically, Michael Durrell has a private equity firm that he founded. He was with Blackstone for a while. Then he started Stone Peak, which is his own. And Stone Peak purchased this airline, Omni, that Melissa Tran was on in April of 2025. And since that purchase in mid-April, their ice flights have skyrocketed. In 2024, they did 20 of these ice flights. And from April to the end of 2025, they did 77.
And this is just this particular entity. This is not all the ice flights.
Right. This is just this airline. So Omni's not even, they don't even do the most ice flights. Global X does the most. And then Eastern Airlines, Avelo did about 15%. What's different about Omni is they're the only airline that will do large jet ice flights to Africa and Asia, these long haul flights. And they get paid way more for it. Any of these long haul flights get a special high-risk premium put on them. So we don't know exactly how much they're making from this, but based on some old price lists and some older documents, it's in the range of $30,000 per flight hour. So a similar trip to the one that Melissa Tron was on in 2019, they got $1.8 million for it. And they've done 77 of these in 7.5 months.
So we're talking about hundreds of these flights under these conditions. But I get what you're saying, which is that Stone Peak and this particular, and Omni in particular, because they do, their flights are some of the cruelest because they're so long.
Because they're so long, and they're also doing the really messed up things that you hear about, like Iranian asylum seekers being sent back to Iran where they could be killed, Russian dissidents being forced back to Russia where they disappear. I don't know if your listeners have heard about these third country removals where they're sending people to prisons in Africa that have never even been to that country. Omni's doing all of those. And so, in the case of the Russians and the Iranians, they're doing a transfer deportation where they're flying them to Egypt, Qatar, Kuwait, and then handing them over to authorities in those countries, and then they're forcing them on a plane back to Iran. It's called chain refoulement. It's a human rights violation. There used to be domestic and international law against this that just isn't being enforced.
I mean, it's almost like to even think of all the different kinds of violations. I mean, you were really calling my attention to the fact that there's all kinds of FAA violations. I mean, not to mention that what you're describing is like these companies and these private equity entities and the people that are invested in them, unfortunately, are all essentially invested in these horrible violations of democracy, the violence of ICE. And, I really appreciate you drawing our attention to these sites, right? What's happening on the plane, what happens when people are sent to places that it's not just about going somewhere you're not from, but put in real danger. I mean, all these things. And I just got to say that it's important for people to understand when you hear people talk about, well, the market is at work and this and that and business leadership. In this case, that translates into somebody figuring out how to subdue people who, I mean, whether someone has a valid asylum claim or not.
Right.
These conditions are absolutely inhumane, unjustifiable, and illegal.
Right. And I didn't even get into the racism of it, because on the flights to Africa, they will put someone in a straitjacket at the drop of a hat. If you ask for your lawyer, if you say, hey, did you get my medicine? I need to take my medication. They'll declare you unruly and put you in a straitjacket.
Because now you're essentially in the airbound incarceration business, right? And all the violence of those systems. And I think this is one thing I just want to sort of detail, and why I think, Gillian, your reporting is so crucial is, we talk about this now as the Trump administration. The Trump administration does this. That's always the subject and actor in the sentence. And I think that one reason why it matters to be detailed about who's actually doing this and how this is being outsourced is that, well, one reason is just in terms of accountability for us to understand that it's like who's complicit with the Trump administration, but also points where we might actually be able to put some pressure on. We're going to get to that before this is over. But now, one point you made when we were talking about this that's really important is that these companies are making loads of money, all these trips, right? They're charging so much, right? But it's not just that it's a business model. It's also a business model that relies on public funding.
Right.
Right. Like this is like our tax money in various ways. Could you talk about that a little bit more? Yeah.
I mean, what I am so struck by is that there's misuse of public funds on both ends. So, DHS pays a contractor called CSI Aviation a huge amount of money to broker these flights. So they're selling these flights and parceling them out to the different ICE airlines, right? And they have a $1.5 billion contract that just started in November. They'd had a $650 million in a 6-month period last year. And And so then CSI is paying Omni or Eastern or Global X to do these flights. And then, Omni is sending that money up the chain to Stone Peak. And the thing about Stone Peak is I was able to get a list of their investors from a source who has access to PitchBook, which is like a private equity, private database. And more than half of the investors for Stone Peak are public employee funds, union pension funds.
Yeah, that's really important. I mean, that's devastating because it shows you how this whole apparatus has embedded this into, so many different institutions, including, like I saw you said the New York State Pension Fund. I need to check my pensions real quick to see what's going on.
And listen, I added Zoran too on a post on Blue Sky because most of the New York City employees, the teachers, the fire department, the police, and just the public workers, all of their pension funds are invested with Stone Peak too.
We're gonna reach out. You know what I'm saying? Things are different now. Zoran's mayor, but we can still reach out and, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like we're gonna make sure that gets some attention. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, we not playing games. That's real serious, and there needs to be questions raised and pressure enacted. I will also say in the realm of taking action, you mentioned that there's a bill that Jasmine Crockett has put out a bill. Is there anything you want to say about that? Because that's also important.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty good. I think anything to get more visibility on what is going on ICE flights and, unmasking what's happening there, the way that we're trying to unmask these ICE agents would be really good. Like basically it would require ICE and DHS to publicly release a list of all the flights that they're doing and to do a better job of reporting use of force on these flights.
So we'll post the link to that legislation, and we want to get more people talking about that because, again, I don't see people, this space has become kind of invisibilized, sort of like to a lot of the public. Of course, it's not in any way invisible if you're one of the many people who's subjected to those conditions on that flight. I wonder what the flight attendant unions, how they're thinking about this, because they have, they understand in really detailed ways how egregious this is.
Yeah. I mean, I know that Sarah Nelson, who's the head of the biggest flight attendants union and is amazing. I know that she sent some letters to the president of Avelo about the human rights abuses and the federal aviation regulation violations that were happening on Avelo ICE flights. But yeah, I would love to see my fellow flight attendants get more involved and raise more of a ruckus. I think most of them don't know either that these kinds of things are happening on these planes because you're talking about like a pretty small segment of flight attendants. Omni only has 300 flight attendants, which is not a lot. And, I actually spoke to 2 Omni flight attendants last night, and they talked about all of this stuff being related. The things that they witnessed were terrible, and they would take it to their bosses and say, this is a violation of this regulation, this is da-da-da-da. And they don't care. They want the contractor money. They want the contractors to be happy. So they're actually like punishing their flight attendants for enforcing safety regulations or trying to enforce safety regulations. And of course, it's not a coincidence that Omni flight attendants are the most underpaid flight attendants in the entire industry. When I worked for my airline 20 years ago as a starting flight attendant in 2005, I made more then than they make now. And I don't mean adjusted for inflation. I mean in real money. I made more 20 years ago than they make now. So
I hate that this is happening, but I love that you are giving us not only the information, but some action steps and some ways that we can actually connect. So shout out to that, you know what I mean? So we appreciate this reporting. One of the things that I found really eye-opening about your reporting was you were talking about these flights are like multi-stop flights that are going overseas. So it's not it's not just like, going from like wherever you, New York or, New Jersey to like, to somewhere in Africa, that's already a long flight, or to Asia.
Right.
But these are also multi-stop flights.
Right. And think about, like, if you've ever been to Africa or Asia, how long that journey was. And that was like probably a pretty direct journey. And you got to get up and move and like walk around an airport when you were making a transfer. And that's not happening to these people. So the longest flight that I tracked last year started on the evening of September 2nd. It started in Mesa, Arizona. It went to Baltimore, Romania, Qatar, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. And, you got about 2 hours on the ground at each one of those places. And these people have to sit in their seats the whole time.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do people get to, what if they have to go to the bathroom?
So much on these flights depends on the whims of the guards. And so people's experiences vary widely. The sort of best case scenario is that they unshackle one of your hands so that you can clean yourself. Not very well, but you can at least clean yourself. They will shut the door, but you're not allowed to lock it, to the lavatory. The worst case scenario is that you try and stand up and they just say, sit the fuck down until you have to go to the bathroom in your seat. And that's like a pretty regular occurrence. I've heard that from employees at Avelo and at Omni.
Right. And then if you kind of like have more to say about your condition and complain,
they'll put you in a straitjacket. They'll put a hood over your head. They'll put a spit guard on you, anything to dehumanize you.
What does the law have to say about restraints and use of restraints on flights?
The FAA has basically just sort of declined to respond to questions about this for as long as it's been going on. This started, hate to say it, during Obama. Shackling did.
Say more about that.
If you're in activist spaces, that they called Obama the deporter in chief because he deported way more people than any of the presidents before him. And, they're the ones who brought in these charter flights. It used to be that if you got deported 9 times out of 10, they just bought you a ticket on a commercial flight and they might have a guard sitting on either side of you, but you were just a regular person on a regular flight. You weren't shackled. And then when they started using these charter flights for these mass deportations, someone somewhere decided that everyone should be shackled. I can't come up for a reason why. There's like 30 guards plus federal agents on every one of these flights. Like, what do they think is going to happen? There are kids on these flights. There are families on these flights. What I've heard from the migrants and from flight attendants is that, people will either just be sort of quiet and numb. Some people are crying the whole time. Some people seem relieved and happy to be going home.
But certainly not in these conditions of travel.
Yeah.
Right?
Some people, there was an Iranian guy who was deported on an Omni flight in, I believe it was November. And he tried to slit his wrists on the tarmac because he's so scared to go home. That's why he left, And the New York Times reported about him. He was able to escape Iran again and is in hiding in another country. One of the flight attendants I spoke to last night said that on one of these flights to Africa, there was a passenger just shouting the whole time, I'm already dead. I'm already dead. They left for a reason.
I one of the things a lot of people have been talking about is that when people try to describe the conditions we're living under, everybody reaches to like Italy, fascist Italy, or Germany and Hitler. And certainly people can make those comparisons. But another way to look at this is that there's already been a kind of fascism, a kind of deeply oppressive, but also economically profitable oppression happening in institutions of incarceration already. And in a way, what you're seeing is that moving outwards, right? Moving. I didn't realize it was moving into the flight realm and they had started doing that since Obama, but that makes sense that it would, of course. But it's also moving out like into the street and hitting citizens and people that, really people did not expect. And I think that the example of looking at what's happening in a carceral space, which in this case is a flight, as an example of like what the real state of the country is really important for people to do and understand. And you don't have to reach to these other horror models of oppression to do that. It's happening right here.
I mean, we're history nerds. Like, I know people often reach for Holocaust and Nazi metaphors, but this is just an extension of our inability to move past slavery. I mean, think about, what do you think of when you think of shackles on wrists and ankles tied to a chain around your waist, right? You think of a slave coffle, right? A line of people moving in a slave coffle, being moved back because they self-emancipated and they got caught and now they're going down south, or they tried to escape and they're being punished by being moved further south, right? Separated from their families. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. And I didn't find this out. I'm getting this from an amazing immigration attorney and professor named Rebecca Sharpless, who's written about this stuff for a long time. The shackles that they use on these flights, the brand is Hyatt and Thompson. That's Thomas Griffin Hyatt, who invented this kind of shackle in the 1780s to transport enslaved Africans.
Wow. No, I didn't know that. So I'm trying to wrap my head around all the economic layers of this. And, the horror on these flights is happening first because this is a business model. We've talked about how it's a business model that relies on public funding in a way because it's like these government agencies are contracting for these flights to happen. But then also now I'm understanding in a different part of your reporting that some of these flights are getting tax breaks, or some of these businesses are getting tax breaks as well. Can you break that down?
Yeah. So I did a story for Zateo about this private jets that are also being used for ICE flights, and particularly the ones that are going to prisons in Africa, in Eswatini, South Sudan. And so I tracked one of these planes, and it's owned by these Israeli-American billionaires who built a bunch of Trump-branded condos in Florida. It's this father and son duo, Gil and Michael Deser. So now Gil and Michael Deser have billions of dollars from selling these condos. Trump takes his little cut for, allowing his name to be used. And then they buy themselves a private jet. Well, with the private jet, on the days you're not using it, you can lease it to one of these charter private jet companies. And if they use it 2 or 3 times in a year, you get a huge tax break on your private jet.
Wow.
And who brought that tax break but Donald Trump in his first term? You usually see the costs of capitalism put as far away from the beneficiaries of capitalism, right? So the cost goes on to the poor, people of color, the incarcerated, the immigrant, far, far away. And, Foxconn factory that the billionaire doesn't own, right?
Right. There's all these layers of deniability.
And then there's this one moment when it all slams together, where you have shackled people on a luxury jet, on a flight to hell, and I cannot get over it. We don't have to do this. It's our money. We don't have to do this. We just have to know and decide.
Wow. Well, I really appreciate this reporting. I mean, I know it's horrible, but this is exactly the kind of thing we want to know. And what the name of your ghost is account again is what?
GillianBrockell.ghost.io.
GillianBrockell.ghost.io. Unrulies, I want us all to go over. I'm going to go over and support, you know what I'm saying, Gillian's ghost account. We're going to be able to hear. First of all, when we go to this ghost account, we can see all the pension funds there, right?
Yeah. So I have a list of all of the blue state and swing state public funds and public employee pension funds listed there that are invested with Stonepeak. And I also have a couple links to, different ways that you can help Melissa Tron and help other Vietnamese returnees, because there's a bunch of them. A lot more of them are going back to Vietnam now than used to be. And there's a really great mutual aid group that some immigration attorneys that I've worked with for my stories have started to help them.
Big shout out to Gillian Brockell. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
What's up, unruly subjects? Yeah. I hope y'all got something out of that interview with Gillian. That was intense, right? Whew. Yeah, man. Ice flights. So yeah, I think we need something to kind of, help us wind down, help us, rejuvenate a little bit. Yo, the other day, I was scrolling the internet. I gotta confess, folks, I was supposed to be doing work, but you know how you hit that point in the afternoon where your brain just can't do any work. So I ain't gonna lie, I got on the gram. All right. Anyway, and all of a sudden, I heard I came across this song that was just like beautiful. You know what I mean? And I actually want y'all to just hear what I heard for a minute, because it was like, it really just, it hit me in a spiritual place. Oh man, do y'all hear it? Bro, listen, I'm watching the John over and over, and then I realized, wait a minute, this artist is somebody that I know. You know what I'm saying? And not only is the artist somebody I know, Coco Watson is here with us today.
Hey.
Yeah.
Hello.
I know Colette Watson as really an organizer, a cultural organizer. We met, I think, in the context of a project called Media 2070.
Shout out.
Yeah, shout out to the Media 2070 folks. You all should all go check that out. It's really important. And so I knew you did music, but please tell us about your work and tell us about this song, first of all.
Yeah, definitely. Chenjerai, first of all, I just got to say, you are kind of a hero out here, because you out here expressing yourself in all the ways. Like you said, I'm trying to do the same. So, with this song and with my music, the title of it is Big Questions. And it's my invitation to people to think beyond what we're taught to accept. And in everyday life, that takes shape. It's just a lot of messages that we kind of get brought up to not question. So I'm asking and inviting people and trying to do it in a musical way, a way where you can actually move your body as well as think.
Man, I love it. I love the way the song sounds and feels. It feels like medicine right now for what we're going through. And then at the same time, I love the concept, right? Big questions. You know what I mean? Come on, man. We live in a world of big questions, right? You know what I mean?
We need them.
And then I learned that this is part of a larger project. This is part of an album that is in the works.
Yes.
And we can help this album get done. So tell us about this album.
My album project is coming out later this year with folks' support, and the title of it is Sanctuary. And I titled it that because I'm originally from the coast of South Carolina, Gullah Geechee people. And over my journey, I've kind of looked around and noticed that Black souls are always on the move, whether we are displaced, whether we're snatched, whether we're just trying to find something better. We oftentimes are just searching for that belonging and that self-determination and that healing, right? And a lot of times we find it with each other. So it's just a meditation on what it looks like to create sanctuary with and for each other, to be that healing, that joy. And sanctuary is the project of my life, I think. And so I'm really passionate about getting it done and asking people to help out. I'm online at ColetteMusic.com and also at Bandcamp. Bandcamp is one of the biggest ways that indie artists like myself can actually be supported. And so
shout out to Bandcamp. You know what I'm saying? Yo, let me just, but I got to ask one question here. That's a beautiful album concept, and it just resonates so strongly. I lived in South Carolina for a while too, and so that idea of sanctuary is also feels like it's deeply, deeply relevant in our political context right now. You know what I mean? With people being deported, this is like, we trying to be in the healing part of the show, but
Yeah.
but have you thought about that at all? Like, is that, you know what I'm saying?
1,000,000%. Yeah, I feel you, because it's a subject that is heavy, but also is light, because we become that light in the darkness for each other, right? But yes, in these times, and I didn't plan this, obviously. I'd been working on the sanctuary concept for years. And it just happened so that we're now at this, boiling point, not the first in history, but this boiling point of sort of our folks being snatched and terrorized right before our very eyes. And I like to think that if we ground ourselves in the idea that we can be sanctuary and safety and healing for each other, and figure out ways to embody that every single day, even when it feels scary, to be that sanctuary for one another, that this doesn't have to be the end of the story. This is simply the beginning of another chapter, right? And it can be a new reality that's abundant with liberation. But that starts with each of us knowing our role in it and being courageous to live that role. And I think that starts with the care that we show each other. And care is the root of that sanctuary.
Oh my God. I love that, because what I love is what you're talking about is a power of sanctuary that's in our power. You know what I mean? What you're talking about is the kind of stuff we ain't got to wait for anybody. We ain't got to wait for nobody to do that. And I just love what you're speaking to. So, all right. So I need everybody to go to the GoFundMe, you know what I mean? And support, throw a little something, whatever you got, throw a little change on this sanctuary so we can manifest this. And I'm telling you, when you hear this music, and we're going to play a little bit more of the music, you're going to be like, I'm not going to be able to stop you, because like me, you're going to be like, I need this record right now. I need this whole project. You know what I'm saying? And let me just say this. The other thing is, I went to Colette's Bandcamp, and I'm like, there's other projects, right? There's other projects on the Bandcamp, and they all slap. Anyway, y'all going to hear it. You know what I'm saying? Much respect to Coco Watson. Thank you. You know what I'm saying? Sanctuary. We're gonna bring it. We're gonna hear it, and we're gonna, kind of go out. We and let you hear the rest of this Big Question song. We hope to talk more soon. Looking forward to next time. All right?
Yes, sir. Looking forward.
All right.
What if people go just like the birds? Seasons change, what they do, and we move around the earth. Call our spirit to fly high, to climb a new mountain high. I don't understand why we don't ask no questions. Just imagination lost. If we don't ask no questions, we'll never have big thoughts. Why we don't ask no questions? Is imagination lost? If we don't ask no questions, we'll never have big thoughts. Ooh, why do things stay the same? Why?
Unruly Subjects is supported by listeners just like you. Join us at unrulysubjectspodcast.com. Unruly Subjects is produced in partnership with Row Home Productions. Boy, I'm proud of Row Home. Alex Lewis is Row Home's creative director. John Myers is Row Home's executive producer. Shout out to my wife, Sadaka, and my daughter, Enyola. Shout out to my assistant, Carissa. Big thanks to Gillian Brockell. Thanks for coming on the show. You know what I mean? The article is called Ice Flights Are Getting Longer and Crueler, published by Mother Jones. You know what I mean? Shout out to Mother Jones for their reporting. Gillian's personal website is gillianbrockell.ghost.io, so you can check there and get all the receipts. Also, I want to give a big shout out to Elizabeth Fay with Contract Faculty United UAW. NYU. You can hear the full interview with Elizabeth on our Patreon. Our theme music was composed by Axel Kakutier. Alex Tatusian made our tile art. You got something you want to let us know? Some feedback? Call up the Unruly Hotline, 215-436-9212. You could text us. You could be anonymous. 215-436-9212. Make sure you subscribe to Unruly Subjects wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow the show on Instagram at Unruly Subjects Pod. And you can follow my personal Instagram at Chinjirai. And tell everybody you know about the show if you like it. You know what I mean? We're trying to spread the good word out here. And yo, did you hear last week's episode about who polices the police with Mac Muir? If you want the real update, not just on the NYPD and Mamdani, but just, what's going on with police accountability, that's the place to be. Mac Muir is the author of Cop, Breaking the Fixed System of American Policing. So you definitely want to check out those episodes and get caught up. And listen, if you're enjoying Unruly Subjects, leave us a review. It really matters. Tell us what you think about the show. And yo, I'm real excited for what we got for you next week, but we're going to leave that as a surprise. So we'll see y'all next week.
Can you feel color? Why would you live in shade? Who gets to decide which color is the color of pain? Somebody tried here. Spirit was blinded by the light. It's a lie. I gotta know why we don't ask no questions. It's imagination law. Questions, we'll never have big thoughts. We don't ask new questions. Is imagination lost? If we don't ask new questions, we'll never have big thoughts.
Productions. Unruly Subjects is supported by listeners just like you. Join us at patreon.com/unrulysubjects.